Welcome back to Behind the Desk, the podcast all about my time working in a recording studio. As ever, I'm John, and today I want to go over some more sessions that have happened over the past few weeks at work, because we are starting to get work again, and it's quite varied work, but most importantly, a lot of the sessions we've had, I don't want to say have gone wrong, more not as straightforward as a typical session, including some Swahili vocals and an acoustic guitar song that we had to learn on the spot. So, before we begin, if you want to get in touch with the show or have any questions for me, then give us a message by searching Wellesley Media on YouTube, Facebook or Instagram. Happy to help the best I can. Now, let's get started with this Swahili vocal session. And it all came about when a woman phoned and asked to record at the studio. Easy enough. However, she wanted her two producers as well as her vocal coach, I think. That's what I think he was anyway, on a Zoom call to help run the session. And this created some questions which needed addressing. One, how do we get everyone to hear each other, i.e. the control room, the recording booth and the Zoom people all talking directly to each other? And two, how can we get high quality audio from the recording session so that the Zoom people can hear it clearly enough to give constructive feedback? Well, me and Tom, the other intern, used a plugin called Listen To by Audio Movers in a session the week before, so it made sense to use that plugin again. And if you didn't listen to last week's episode, what Listen To does is basically turn your recording session into a live audio stream, which people can access when you give the link to them. So this cleared up the issue of the Zoom people hearing the session. So the next thing we had to tackle was getting everyone to hear everyone else, which took an awfully long time to figure out. And it was during those 3 hours of testing prior to the session I realised something. Routing is bloody confusing, like really confusing. The concept itself is actually quite simple. Just follow the signal flow in and out of various equipment until point A gets to point B. In practice, it's a little harder to do. And rather than explaining the work process of trying to figure it out, I'm going to try and explain the final outcome so you know what we're working with. So, we had a vocal mic patched into a preamp, which was going into the desk, which was going into Logic and out of the stereo output. Just like any other recording session. Easy enough. Then, you had the talkback mic me and Tom were using on another channel on the desk and also being sent out of the stereo output. The reason being that, when using the Listen To plugin, you can only have 2 channels of audio streaming, so you have to basically stream everything, or the whole session, through stereo output. Then, the producers had to open a link to the Listen To stream on their computers in order to hear the session. They also had to set up a Zoom call and turn on the Zoom call so that they could speak through Zoom. And when they spoke through Zoom, me and Tom had an aux cable routing the signal out of Zoom and into another channel on the desk so that the recording booth could hear what was being said. Which was a pretty convoluted setup, I will agree with you, but that ain't the worst thing about it, because for some reason, when you only have 2 people on a Zoom call at any time, there's no feedback in this setup that we had. As soon as you had 3, or in our case 4 people, the 3 producers and us in the control room, then feedback started, and we're not sure how or why it happened, but it did. So to combat this little hiccup, we shall say, we had to ask everyone on the Zoom call to mute their mics when they weren't speaking, because that seemed to be the only thing to stop it. It was a very strange setup, and it took far too long for us to figure out and test before the session began. I mean, it worked fine during the session itself, but it was a very long process to route everything together, and I'm sure we could have done it a better way. But one thing is for sure, I hate routing things. I like things to be connected once and then I never have to touch them again. That is what I discovered in this session. Definitely as little routing as possible, thank you very much. So yeah, that was just one of the sessions that's been an interesting experience recently. And whilst this vocal session had time to repair the studio beforehand, the next one is the complete opposite. We had no time to prep whatsoever. So here's what happened. The boss booked some guy in to record guitar. We hadn't been told the song or if he was doing vocals as well. All we knew that there was a guy coming in with an acoustic guitar and he was going to record some acoustic guitar. So me and Tom thought it'd be a cool idea to try and use mid-side technique. What mid-side technique is basically two condenser microphones, one facing the sound source with a cardioid polar pattern, and the other facing 90 degrees away from the sound source with a figure 8 polar pattern. You can use any pattern, but we used figure of 8. The idea is that this technique allows you to control the stereo width of the guitar, which is useful when mixing it later, in case you need the guitar to sound wider in a mix. The only downside to this is that it is an absolute pain in the backside to set up correctly, because if you don't have it in the right spot, you can have a lopsided recording or a very phasey recording, and nobody wants that. So we began setting up this about 10 minutes before the guitar man arrived. Probably should have started sooner in hindsight, but we didn't, and by the time the guy had arrived, we still hadn't got the right mic position. So we spent the first 20-30 minutes of this guy's session setting up the mics, and I did feel bad because we should have had this done beforehand, but things weren't going right for us that day at all. What made the session even more challenging was the fact that this guy came in, brought his guitar, and then asked me and Tom to play his guitar for him and learn the song, which was an original. Now, thankfully, the song was simply 3 chords, but I still have no idea why you would come into a recording studio with your guitar and then expect somebody else to play for you. Now, maybe he was shy or nervous, I'm not sure. I just thought it was a very strange thing to do, especially giving no warning prior to the session about it. But we managed it. We managed to figure out all the chords, and then about 10 minutes of recording the guitar, the guy suddenly asked for us to make up a fingerstyle arrangement for the song as well. Again, it wasn't very hard, we just used an arpeggio pattern basically for the chords. But again, a very strange thing to ask for halfway through a recording, which meant we spent another 30 minutes trying to figure out the new guitar part and then record it. Then having to comp all the takes together that we'd done so far so we could sing over it. At this point he only had like 30 minutes left of his session, and luckily he could belt out this song pretty quickly and with decent quality. But the whole session just seemed, I don't know, very unplanned, and a lot of decisions that should have been made clear prior to the session itself. On both sides really, we should have planned what microphones and what techniques we were going to do, and the client should have planned what he actually wanted to record and who was going to record it. I guess this is one of those sessions and clients that help demonstrate why you need a plan for a recording session, because if you don't, then you waste everyone's time and things just don't run smoothly. Maybe. That's what I took away from it anyway. I could be entirely wrong. If you agree or disagree with my opinion, then let me know by getting in touch at Wellesley Media. And that's it for the past few sessions we've had. Very different, and neither being the most straightforward of sessions, but it was all good experience all the same, and not every session has to be amazing to work. So, thank you for listening to today's episode of Behind the Desk. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, consider giving a like on whatever platform you find this on. I've been John, and I shall catch you all in the next one.